this is the most amazing thing you're ever going to hear about. I'm telling you, so just brace yourself. First off, what we want to understand what hydrogen is, earlier, what was your name again? Christy, yeah. Christy was asking, was like, well, wait a second, like we already drink water and water is H2O, so isn't there already hydrogen in water? Like, what's the difference? And I explained to her, well, look at the structure of water. It looks like Mickey Mouse, right? It has the oxygen and then the two hydrogens connected to it. So those hydrogens are connected to the oxygen. So they're not available. Like we breathe air for oxygen. You can't just drink water or be a fish and be in the water or something. You have to breathe the oxygen. So this hydrogen we're talking about is just H2. It's H2 gas. This is explosive. And we could demonstrate this. We could probably get some hydrogen. This is the molecule of the century because it's going green, the alternative fuel, but it's also the alternative medicine, if you will. It's for our bodies. It's for our health. And you're going to see, I hope through this presentation, that not only is there some really amazing scientific research, there's some really interesting even theological and philosophical perspectives about this very humble molecule, molecular hydrogen. So let's get into it, shall we? All right, so the first, hydrogen gas was shown to be therapeutic in 2007. There was an article published in this journal, Nature Medicine. Now, Nature Medicine is one of the most prestigious medical journals there are. And what they found here is they took a rat and they induced a middle cerebral artery occlusion. In other words, they cut the blood supply to the brain, and then when they let the blood go again, that causes what's known as an ischemia reperfusion injury. Lots of free radicals, like what turns your apples brown, it's also turning your brain brown. It's oxidizing, it's rusting, and that's really damaging. And so you get this ischemia reperfusion injury that's lethal. Well, when they used helium gas, of course, there was no effect. When they used hydrogen gas, only 2% hydrogen gas, which is below the flammability level, just 2% hydrogen gas, you can see the dead areas. In fact, I'll just point to it here. This is the dead area, but here with hydrogen gas, it markedly suppressed the brain damage just from the hydrogen gas, just from the simple molecule. So when this article was published, I mean, it really changed the paradigm and the understanding of hydrogen, because hydrogen is everywhere. Like, all of a sudden, we see this have a very significant medical effect. So this is another very interesting study. This is in Parkinson's disease. So I researched in Japan at Nagoya University. And this is a publication that was just there right before I got there. And what they did is they induced a Parkinson's disease model by injecting a toxin, 6-hydroxydopamine. So just, there's lots of toxins in our environment, but they injected this toxin into the brain, and it caused Parkinson's disease. And you can see, because it's not happy trying to trace its tail like a dog. It's sad. It has the disease, and so it's going around. It could regulate its motion. The exact same thing was done with the other group, but the only difference is this group drank hydrogen water. Simply drinking water, and it had this profound effect. How many of you drink water? Okay, so you could be, well, you don't want to be a rat, but But of course, this really got people excited. It's like, okay, this is great results in these animal models. Can this have effect in humans? And so more research was done and is continuing being done to understand these effects. In fact, the idea that hydrogen gas could be therapeutic is not so crazy. In fact, in 1988, it was hypothesized that hydrogen gas could be therapeutic because it's actually produced from our bacteria in our intestines, and all the time. And then in 2009, the Forsyth Institute in Boston, Massachusetts, they did a study where they took some of the bacteria, the E. coli, and they did a genetic knockout to remove the enzyme, hydrogenase enzyme, that produces hydrogen gas. And then when they gave the animal fiber, well, all the benefits from fiber were eliminated. When they gave bacteria back in that could metabolize the fiber and produce hydrogen gas, the benefits are reinstated, suggesting that a lot of the benefits from your fiber could actually be mediated from the production of hydrogen gas. So how many of you had your parents tell you, oh, eat your fruits and vegetables, right? Well, that has fiber in it, and that fiber can be metabolized to produce hydrogen gas. So again, we're going back to something very natural, very the way nature intended it to be. How much more fiber did our ancestors way back when used to eat compared to what we eat now? How about how much antibiotics did our ancestors have, right, versus what we have now? So you can see that maybe during this population we get a lot less hydrogen gas production naturally than we used to have. Okay, so it's really interesting that hydrogen gas really was there to benefit us from the beginning. In fact, now there's over 1,200 scientific publications that are showing the effects of molecular hydrogen in over 170 different human and animal disease models, and essentially every organ of the human body. How many of you can name 170 different diseases? Of course, these are disease models, but the fact is, this is really spectacular. It has these effects in so many different areas. And so, as a scientist, we have to think, hey, man, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. But you guys are also like, you're a different group, because people say, oh, yeah, you think you can live forever? Yeah, actually, I do. So if it sounds too good to be true, then let's do it, right? So it's interesting, the people, who are against this type of community, their response to like, well, why do you care about, old age anyways? Why is that such a big deal to you? And their response is like, I mean, it doesn't last that long anyway. That's kind of sad. But we're like, okay, well, we worry about it because we're going to cure it, right? Yeah, that's right. So I think that all these small and simple things, and hydrogen, which is the smallest molecule in the universe, is here as one of these simple things to help us achieve our goals, right? And that's what we're going to find as we go through this. So there's different methods of administration. In fact, there I'm in that chair there in Shanghai, a medical clinic, and I'm just inhaling molecular hydrogen. Yeah, and I'm happy. I'm like smiling in both of them. In Japan, I'm in a hyperbaric hydrogen chamber, checking it out. I'm like, man, this hydrogen, it's great. Hydrogen's a happy guy too. I mean, think about it. When you say hydrogen, he's like, hi, how are you doing? Hi, right? So, I mean, he's already very optimistic. This hydrogen is really something. There's also hydrogen-rich saline injections. You can take a hydrogen-rich bath, and then there's simply just taking the gas and dissolving it into the water and then drinking hydrogen-rich water. So lots of different ways that we can get this. Now, when the pharmacokinetics, when you ingest molecular hydrogen through, like, say, drinking water, then it diffuses through the stomach into the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream to the heart, and then you can measure exhaled breath hydrogen. So it's really showing it is getting into the body, and we can measure it. And most of the hydrogen gas, you exhale it out. So it goes into the body, it does its magic, which we're trying to figure out how it's working, but it does whatever it does, and then you exhale it out. So it doesn't build up in the system. It doesn't build up to make some toxic level like maybe some pharmaceuticals would or something. It's easy to go out. In fact, that's why they used it, one of the reasons they've used it in deep sea diving. Since the 1940s, they've used hydrogen gas for usually use helium, but sometimes they use hydrogen gas for really, really deep dives and they've done studies like at millions of times higher concentrations than what we need to use for therapeutic use with no chronic toxic effects. So again, this really speaks to its safety of hydrogen gas. It's something really natural for us. Now this is also really interesting because hydrogen gas is so small. So in this diagram, we have like the cell membrane. The green here is the cell membrane, and then we'll talk about like hydrophobic. Well, first the red, fiery-looking thing. That's the hydroxyl radical. Let's say those are radicals, and they're going to be damaging our cell membranes, the little mitochondrion, the yellow shapes, and also in the nucleus, and they're causing all this damage. And then we take something like a hydrophobic antioxidant, so it's fat soluble like vitamin E. Well, fat solubles, they don't really dissolve well in solution. So they're going to want to stay in the membrane. So the vitamin E will want to stay in the membrane, but it's going to have a difficult time going into the cytosol, into the liquid portion of the cell. And so it can only be so effective. Then you have something like vitamin C, which is a hydrophilic antioxidant. It's water soluble. Well, how is that going to get through the cell membrane? Right? It has to go through some transporter. And it can't really stay in the more hydrophobic portions very well either because it's water soluble. Well, hydrogen gas, it has no problem. It can go into the cell membrane. It can go into the solution. It can go everywhere easier than any other antioxidant or molecule. It's the smallest molecule, so it can go out really easy. It's neutral. It's hydrophobic. It has all the properties needed, so it can penetrate through the cell membrane, into the mitochondria, through the organelles, into the nucleus, and so on, and where it can exert its protective effects. So it's such a great molecule with these properties. But now we look at the idea of these free radicals, right? Like we talked about, the apples is turning brown and the rusting and everything. This idea of the free radical theory of aging was very popular. Of course, there's so much more to that than such a simple myopic perspective. But this has caused this huge antioxidant marketing, right? Take your antioxidants, and so, right? It's been a huge thing, but is it effective? Does it really work? Well, when we look at the research, for example, in this review article, they found that taking antioxidants can actually blunt the health-promoting effects of exercise. Now consider that, because when you exercise, you produce a lot more free radicals. You're breathing more oxygen, right? When you're running. At least when I run, I breathe more. But when you do that, you do produce more free radicals, so it starts to make sense. Oh, okay, well, I need to take more antioxidants then. But then when you do that, you start having you can get problems. For example, maybe you blunt the anti-diabetic effect, or maybe you blunt the increased mitochondrial biogenesis. Again, these are taking like high levels of antioxidants, not just normal, but just high levels of pill antioxidants. And they've also done even studies with looking at mortality. They found, hey, look, smokers who take lots of carrots, they seem to live longer. Well, carrots are high in beta-carotene, antioxidant. Look, it just makes so much sense. How have all the smokers take lots of vitamin A? So they do the study, and did they finish the study? No, they didn't even finish the study, because those taking the antioxidants were dying and getting lung cancer faster than those on placebo. So we don't know all the reasons why, but we have to be very careful taking really high levels of these antioxidants, because they're not just simple radical scavengers. They have a lot of other effects. Moreover, we need free radicals. In fact, free radicals, they are involved in signal transduction. Nitric oxide, you've heard of this? This is how Viagra works, Not that I need it, but no, just kidding. But this nitric oxide is a free radical by definition. And if you neutralize that, then you're gonna have some issues. No pun intended. Also for your immune system. So we need these free radicals, and when you exercise, these reactive oxygen species, they actually mediate a lot of the benefits of exercise. They activate transcription factors. They do all these things. So we can't just take a whole bunch of exogenous antioxidants and then we're gonna essentially neutralize those and blunt the effects. So we have to be really careful with the moderation, right, and how we do things. We need to do the way that nature intended it to be, right? Now, we do see, though, that hydrogen gas, when there is real oxidative stress, not just fanciful oxidation going on, but real oxidative stress, then hydrogen gas can be beneficial. In fact, in this on your let's see, if I was Faye, you guys on your left side, still get my left and right confused. But you can see hydrogen gas decreases various markers of oxidative stress, like your MDA, your 8-OHDG, a marker of DNA damage, your protein carbonyls, and on the other side, markers of antioxidant status are increased. Superoxide dismutase, glutathione, all of these are very important antioxidant molecules in the body that hydrogen gas can also increase. So it does both of them. So it has these potentials. We see this in both preclinical and clinical studies. So one of the ways it does it is really interesting. Hydrogen gas actually can activate what's known as an NRF2 pathway. Have you ever heard of this before, NRF2? Right? This is a critical one. It regulates over 200 cytoprotective proteins and enzymes. So beneficial. Well, isn't it interesting that hydrogen gas also can activate this transcription factor? And when it's activated, that NRF2 goes over and binds to the ARE, the antioxidant response element, actually better electrophile response element, but then it ends up inducing the production of these cytoprotective proteins and enzymes. That is amazing. And we've seen this with using like iRNA interference studies, pharmacologically blocking the NRF2 pathway, like a lot of different ways to really demonstrate that hydrogen gas does activate this pathway. We're not entirely sure on the exact primary target, but we are seeing that yes, hydrogen gas does do this. Another way it can decrease the free radical production is via the cell modulation or modulating signal transduction. So sometimes we have like a hyperimmune response, for example, like especially as we start to get older, we have a dysregulated inflammation, and so we can get a hyper-inflammatory response and produce a lot of free radicals. And some of that is done by this NADPH oxidase system. And you can see it's taking molecular oxygen, O2, and it's converting it to superoxide anion radicals. Well, hydrogen gas can actually downregulate this system, so you end up producing less free radicals. So you're preventing the excessive formation. So not only are you increasing the NRF2 upregulation, so you have all that antioxidant defense, but you're actually preventing the production of an excessive amount of free radicals. So you're able to regulate. Hydrogen gas is like this redox adaptogen, okay? It helps to regulate your body's homeostasis. In fact, this is a good demonstration here. So in this graph, we have concentration of 8-OHDG, which is a marker of oxidative stress or oxidation that's going on. And then on the x-axis, we see that we have a hydrogen gas right here. Sorry, there's no hydrogen gas, nothing's added. No H2, no radiation, and we have like a basal level right there. So that's how it is in the cells. We always have this base level. We want to keep that right there. And then when we go to the next one, we add hydrogen gas and no radiation. And look what happens. Look at the difference between these two. That's right. Nothing happens. But that's exactly what you would want, because you have already a normal, healthy, functioning cell. You don't have any problems. So it doesn't decrease it or perturb it like maybe some other pharmacological agents would or something. Just forces it to move one way or the other. It helps to maintain the homeostasis. Now, when you administer radiation with no hydrogen gas, well, that radiation shoots the oxidative stress way up, causes lots of DNA damage. So, but then when you take hydrogen gas, you can see it's quite significantly attenuates that oxidative damage. So, and this is radiation. So, like, I flew here, and so what did I do before I, got on the flight? Took some hydrogen. That may help attenuate some of that radiation that I'm going to get from being 30,000 feet in the air. And this is one of the simple benefits of molecular hydrogen. In fact, we can compare hydrogen gas to other antioxidants. In this case, this is looking at hydrogen-based testicular oxidative stress induced by nicotine, and this is in an animal model in mice. But in this case, we have T for Tyler. Now testosterone. Just kidding. Same thing. I'm just kidding. So we have the control level. This is what we want, and then when we give the nicotine, of course, it plummets the testosterone level. And the same thing with the sperm motility and sperm concentration. When you give the hydrogen gas, you'll see that it helps to maintain the same concentration, whereas neither vitamin C nor vitamin E were effective statistically. So only hydrogen gas was effective at maintaining these levels. And maybe that's because those other molecules had a difficult time even getting into the testis barrier, right? And just don't work the same way as hydrogen gas, being able to regulate the NRF2 pathway, being able to adaptogenically modulate the redox homeostasis of the cell, okay? Now, let's go into some more romantic perspective of hydrogen gas, but it's still based on science. This is really interesting. First off, why would hydrogen have any of these biological effects? Well, hydrogen has been intimately involved in the origins of the universe, right? This is like the Big Bang. Hydrogen was the first one. If there's anything eternal and ageless, it's hydrogen. Like literally, in the most absolute sense, hydrogen is the ageless molecule. An ageless molecule for an aging society, right? So when we consider, so hydrogen gas was there from the beginning, and then the genesis of life. So we've seen like the Stanley Miller experiments and everything, that the simple molecules, hydrogen gas was there. Maybe even the deep sea hydrothermal vents, hydrogen gas was being produced, and that the various metals and enzymes would kind of interact with that and then finally pull off the energy from hydrogen, and it would be an energy source, and then life was created. So hydrogen gas was actually involved in the genesis of life. So consider that. In the origins of the universe and in even the genesis of life itself, where we came from, we also come from hydrogen, just like the stars, right? Just like the sun. The hydrogen powers the sun as well, okay? And then we have the evolution of eukaryotes. So you have your plant and animal cells. So first we have the prokaryotes, like your bacteria and archaea, and then we have our plant and animal cells. Well, it turns out a lot of the evidence points to the fact that hydrogen was most likely the very key, the very critical key that created the bond or forged the diversion, if you will, from the prokaryotes to the eukaryotes. It was involved in this entire evolutionary process. We've always been exposed to hydrogen from literally since the dawn of time. And then we've developed like these symbiotic relationships with hydrogen gas. We have our intestinal bacteria produce hydrogen gas. We've always been exposed to it. And so hydrogen now, which was the very beginning of the universe. So, this Professor Harlow, who's a famous astronomer, he said that if God did make the world with the word, that word would be hydrogen. Right? And this is what it is. And then Jesus says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Well, you know what? Hydrogen was first. And now in this upcoming, this awareness of what we're coming to these last days, right? Now hydrogen, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Now we're going back to hydrogen. Now we're understanding it, right? and consider this example too. So life is balanced between this oxidation and reduction. Okay, it's like a battery. You can't just have a negative electrode, right, or a positive terminal of the battery. You have to have both. You're like, I'll just have all the positive sides. You have to have both, and it's just like that in the body as well. You have to have both sides, and you have to have this homeostasis. And every organ, the cells, everything works like this. And when you consider the things that characterize oxidation the most, well, on this side, you have all the oxidizing molecules and things in the body. Well, oxygen really characterizes oxidation. It's in the name, right? Oxygen, oxidation. And on the other side of the spectrum of reduction, well, what characterizes that the most? Well, when it comes to chemistry, it's hydrogen. Hydrogen is the reduction, the reducing molecule. And interesting, it's like a yin and yang type relationship, this balance, right? And when the two react together, you form the life-giving solvent water. It's just this magical, such an interesting idea that life itself evolved and was produced and is based upon this relationship between hydrogen and oxygen. And now we have water, and now we're finding that, we need to have this balance between everything, and we can't just focus on oxygen. I mean, there's hyperbaric oxygen, there's oxygen water, there's oxygen bars, there's, go do this oxygen therapy, oxygen. What about Mr. Hydrogen? He's like, hey guys, what about me? Like, I actually produced oxygen, like, right? So hydrogen is kind of there as this primordial antioxidant, if you will, to help balance the side of oxygen, to help justify the life itself, the way it works, and that's why I mean by this. It is interesting philosophy and even theological perspective when you consider this area, but it's also based upon science in terms of what we actually see with the evidence. So we're getting back to our roots. We're getting back to understanding hydrogen gas. And so when we consider, this is a really important point. We know about oxidative stress. This has been pounded so much. But you also need to consider then, we can also have reductive stress. You can have too much antioxidants, like we talked about with the high levels of supplementation. You can have too much. There's actually genetic defects where you are born with having too high levels of say, the NRF2 pathway that's active, just too high. Now you can get like cardiomyopathies and maybe even cancer and other things. So there has to be this balance. Well, not only can you have reductive stress, you can have both oxidative stress and reductive stress occurring at the same time in the same cell. So how do you think, why do you think that if you have this occurring at the same time in the same cell, why would taking a conventional antioxidant help that? It doesn't. In fact, it can make it worse. And in fact, we have evidence both in animals and humans showing that it does make it worse. So what we call this is redox dysregulation. I was trying to make this in the bathroom, but David and Susan, they're like, what is he doing in there? So this is really, I think, is a real issue with aging and diseases and everything, is this redox dysregulation, and we get too much oxidative stress and too much reductive stress at the same time. And that's very problematic. And hydrogen, that's where it really shines, because it can come in and as a redox adaptogen can bring things back to homeostasis, the way it's supposed to be. Now, here's another interesting study. So this is showing hydrogen gas suppressed obesity. So these two mice right here, well, they did everything the same. They played together, they ate together, they read stories to each other. No, they didn't. But the two groups, they did everything the same except for one thing. One of them drank hydrogen water and the other didn't. And you can see just by drinking hydrogen water, it suppressed obesity. In fact, when you do this, the math, it equated to about a 20% caloric restriction. And we know about the benefits of caloric restriction, right? And the fasting, intermittent fasting. What is the first thing that happens when you start fasting? You get hungry, right? Right. One of the reasons we get hungry is because of this hormone. I know I'm a scientist teaching you this stuff, right? You get hungry. But the reason why we get hungry, one of the reasons is because we have this hormone called ghrelin that's produced, and ghrelin is this hunger hormone, but it's also very neuroprotective. It has anti-inflammatory effects, a lot of great benefits. Well, you know what hydrogen gas also does? It induces the production of ghrelin, gastric ghrelin production. And in fact, that was shown to mediate some of the benefits in that Parkinson's disease study I showed earlier. They did further studies showing that actually hydrogen gas induces ghrelin secretion, and the neuroprotective ghrelin is what mediates the benefits of molecular hydrogen, at least in part, because I did a gene knockout study, hydrogen was still effective. So it works on so many different levels, but ghrelin is one of them. And going with this fasting and things, we're learning more about autophagy, right? You guys know autophagy or autophagy, right? This I think, is one of the most amazing, important discoveries that we understand, and how it really relates to longevity and health. And hydrogen gas also has a role in that. In fact, there are several studies showing that in some cases, hydrogen gas can inhibit autophagy, which in some cases is very important, because if you have too much autophagy going on, that's atrophy. It can lead to apoptosis. That's why you can't fast for years on end. You will actually die. You actually need to eat, right? So you can't have too much of that, but you need to have the right amount. So in some cases, hydrogen gas actually induces autophagy. In other cases, hydrogen gas inhibits autophagy. So it does both induces and inhibits autophagy, working through various STAT3 and FOXO3 signaling. Of course, you guys already know that. But there's lots of ways hydrogen gas is able to do this. So in this case, it almost helps to regulate autophagy as well. So you can see it's like this redox adaptogen to regulate the redox homeostasis. It's also regulating inflammatory cascades, and it's also regulating autophagy. Those are the underlying issues of diseases and aging. And hydrogen is doing all of them. But it's still a very simple, mild molecule. Hydrogen is not a cure-all. It's not going to be like, oh, I took this and look, now I'm 50 years younger or whatever, although I am 84. But hydrogen gas is such a great adjuvant therapy to use with all the other things that we're already using. Now, there's just a couple of studies, like in this one, I helped with this article with Beijing University, and we showed the hydrogen gas was therapeutic with ovarian cancer, helped shrink the tumor. So we see even areas for cancer. This one, hydrogen increases resilience to stress in mice. And this is likely mediated by the pituitary adrenal axis in the inflammatory response. Because how many of you guys suffer from stress, right? Like that. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's why we want to do these like these water plunges in the cold. How about we take hydrogen, or how about we plunge in hydrogen water, right? now we're getting serious. So yeah, hydrogen gas was able to do this. We found that we took the animals and we gave them a whole bunch of different harsh types of stress, acute and chronic stress. Force them to stay up all night and change their eating and their sleeping patterns and their all these things, and it was very effective. And there's a clinical study that was done also with that, and they've actually found that just drinking hydrogen water decreased the sympathetic nerve activation, so they are more parasympathetic. And they help to improve mood and anxiety. We also looked at autism, which seems to be a growing epidemic, and we gave the mothers hydrogen-rich water and then their offspring, and we also injected this toxin, valproic acid, which induces autism, but those that drank the hydrogen water greatly prevented the development of autism. Really improved their symptoms. So when you look at autism coming from environmental factors and toxins, well, maybe hydrogen water could help prevent that. Here's that study with a clinical study in healthy people. Just drinking hydrogen water improves mood and anxiety. So with inflammation, because hydrogen gas regulates all the inflammatory things, we see these benefits in the arthritis, pancreatitis, and it's because hydrogen gas regulates these transcription factors, right? Like the HMBG1, NFKB, all these are transcription factors that produce all these pro-inflammatory cytokines that cause all this harmful inflammation. Now, this is interesting too. So in a post-cardiac arrest, what happens is when they start the heart again, then you get that ischemic reperfusion like I was talking about. Well, normally you see it says 43%. So 43% would die after they restart the heart. But then when they do TH, which is therapeutic hypothermia, that's the standard treatment. TH, 77% survived. So big difference between the 43%. And that's why it's a standard procedure of what we do, is therapeutic hypothermia. Well, when you did hydrogen gas, survival rate was 92%. Even more effective than therapeutic hypothermia. And when you combine the two, because hydrogen is great to combine with what you already do, when you combine the two, 100% survived. So again, hydrogen really is showing some great effects. In fact, they're looking at the Japanese government approved inhalation of hydrogen gas for the treatment of post-cardiac arrest syndrome. And they're doing a huge study with 360 patients in a whole bunch of different hospitals to really show the effects of hydrogen gas. Also with mild cognitive impairments leading to Alzheimer's disease, specifically those with this ApoE4 genotype, drinking hydrogen water improved the disease. They improved with both the Alzheimer's disease assessment score as well as the word recall task just by drinking hydrogen water. It was a year long, about 80 patients or so. One more study I want to show you is with stroke. So this study, they from 1,000 patients and through the inclusion-exclusion criteria went down to 50 people, 25 in each group. And 25 in a hydrogen group and 25, not just a control, but 25 in the approved medical drug group. So this is a group that's already, we're using a drug that's already been approved medically. And they did this study and looked at the results. In this case, hydrogen gas was more effective than the approved medical drug in both the changes in the National Institutes of Health score as well as in the MRI signal. Hydrogen gas was actually more effective than the approved medical drug. And we see this with several other studies as well. Hydrogen gas, such a great, simple molecule. And he's just waiting for us to understand him or her or it. But these are the days that we're excited for. But we need a lot more research. We need to understand the exact mechanisms of how hydrogen gas is working. We need to understand the doses of low dose or high dose or the various methods of administration. So we still need a lot of research in order to really understand hydrogen. But because we know it's safe and because we see these benefits in preclinical and clinical studies, we say, hey, you know what, let's do it. Because the fact is, there are some people many people don't have access to medical care. And so hydrogen gas can be really good for them. There are other people who have too much access to medical care, right? And hydrogen gas could be used to actually help prevent them from having to take so much medical care or even mitigate some of the toxic effects from the medical care, like chemotherapy. Hydrogen gas actually can help prevent the damage from radiotherapy or chemotherapy and things. So we see so many applications from hydrogen gas, but we need to continue to spread the awareness and spread the word. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.